Hi, Carolyn Stevens. Many of my perceptions and observations about how leaders behaved are actually formed as a result of the 360-degree feedback discussions I have with the team members of leaders I coach. After all, it's in these safe, intimate and candid interactions that team members' perceptions are genuinely laid on the table. And that transparency makes their thinking like gold for their leaders' growth and development. This bulletin is again one that capitalizes on these crucial team member observations. One of the very noticeable traps that we human beings fall into if we're not alert to its dangers is to incriminate and blame others when something goes wrong. We physically, verbally or attitudinally point our finger at someone else. We think, talk and behave as if another person is the cause of the problem. Now, some finger pointing is okay, it's actually healthy, but most of the finger pointing I hear is unproductive. In fact, it's actually very destructive. Let's distinguish this perilous activity from its safe cousin. Your finger pointing is perilous when your finger is pointing out accusingly at someone else. And it's okay when you're pointing your finger back in toward you. More commentary required, I hear some of you say. Okay, let's look at Dean's scenario. As always, I'm using a substitute name here. Dean, on most counts, is a superb leader. And there's one standout that distances him from his team members, that creates mistrust and that diminishes the confidence and motivation of his team. When something goes wrong, or even when it looks like something's going to go wrong, Dean is quick to hold others responsible and at fault. Habitually, he points his finger at someone else. For example, Dean's team's results are below par, way lower than expectations. In a team meeting, Dean's habitual behaviour is to say something like, "You guys just aren't pulling your weight. You're just not putting in the effort that you need to put in to turn this thing around." Now, these are not very motivating comments, are they? Especially if the team thinks that they have already been putting in a good effort. How defensive and self-protective do you think his team members would react as a result? By the way, their emotional reaction might not be overt, and mark my words, there will be performance and productivity related consequences. Imagine if Dean said something like, "Okay guys, we can see that these numbers are not looking good. The question I have for you is, what can I do to better support you to get these figures to where we need them to be?" In take two, Dean's finger pointing inwards and accepting some responsibility for the situation. And this is when finger pointing is okay, when your finger's pointing right back in at you. Now let's be clear about this. Sometimes someone else is at fault. And regardless of who made the mistake, who caused the error, it's dysfunctional to point your finger at another person, physically, verbally, or attitudinally. Your finger pointing will always cause a reaction. Defensiveness, resistance, mistrust, distancing, lowered morale, and reduced productivity are typical. And the good news is, it's not going to be hugely difficult for you to habituate a much more constructive and more productive behaviour, provided you stick at it. I want you to do a mental stocktake. Think about 2 or 3 recent interactions, particularly those that didn't go as smoothly as you would have preferred. Consider your communication and your behaviours in those instances. In which direction was your finger pointing? If your finger was pointing out, physically, verbally or attitudinally, how did the other person or people respond? And remember, their response may not have been very obvious at the time. What will you do to habituate more inward finger pointing? It's very productive leadership behaviour.